I found myself sitting on the edge of the couch, my thoughts spiraling into a vortex of disbelief and confusion. My name is Darren, and until recently, I believed my marriage to Clara was as solid as the foundation of our home. 14 years together, built on trust and companionship, or so I thought. What happened over the past week has left me questioning everything, from who Clara really is to the life we built together. The chain of events began innocuously enough, a barbecue at my brother Scott's house. It was one of those sunny weekends where laughter and the scent of grilled meat filled the air. Families mingled, old friends caught up, and children ran around playing tag. Clara and I had always enjoyed these gatherings, but this one would be different in ways I could never have anticipated. As the sun began to set and drinks started flowing more freely, someone proposed a game of truth or dare. It wasn't unusual. We played similar games at past gatherings. The suggestion was met with cheers and laughter. Scott initiated the game with his wife, Emma, daring her to kiss her longtime friend Ben. Everyone laughed as Emma went along with the dare, sharing a playful kiss with Ben. But what started as innocent fun quickly took a darker turn. A friend of Scott's, someone I vaguely remembered from college, spoke up after a few rounds. "So, anyone here into open relationships?" Greg asked with a mischievous grin. His wife, Laura, standing beside him, didn't seem fazed. Instead, she joined in, talking about how liberating it was to embrace such a lifestyle. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The casual way they discussed something so intimate made me deeply uncomfortable. I glanced at Clara, expecting her to share my unease. But instead, I caught an expression on her face that sent a chill down my spine. Curiosity. Scott laughed, trying to steer the conversation back to lighter territory, but it was too late. The seed had been planted. Clara's gaze lingered on Greg and Laura as they shared stories of how their open arrangement had reinvigorated their marriage. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted between Clara and me. When we returned home that night, the air was heavy with unspoken words. Clara was unusually quiet, her eyes focused ahead as if lost in thought. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut, chalking it up to my own overthinking. But when we finally settled into the living room, Clara broke the silence. "Darren," she began softly, her voice almost hesitant, "have you ever thought about trying something different in our marriage?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Different how?" I asked cautiously. Her response was measured, but the words hit me like a freight train. "Not a fully open relationship," she said. "Just something to spice things up, maybe for a short time, to see how it feels." My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. The mere suggestion was like a betrayal of everything we had built together. "Clara, are you serious? What are you even saying?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. She hesitated, then placed a hand on my knee. "I'm not saying I want to be with someone else. I'm saying maybe we could explore together, just for a week." Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "Explore? You mean you want me to just stand by while—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. The thought was too nauseating to articulate. Clara's expression softened. "Darren, it's not about replacing you or betraying you. It's about strengthening us. Trust me, it could bring us closer." I stood up abruptly, pacing the room as anger and disbelief seethed through me. "Closer? How does inviting someone else into our marriage bring us closer, Clara? This is insane." She sighed, a mix of frustration and disappointment in her eyes. "You're misunderstanding me. This isn't about tearing us apart. It's about growth." The conversation spiraled into an argument, neither of us willing to concede. By the end of the night, I found myself sleeping on the couch, unable to face the woman I thought I knew so well. The trust we had built over the years felt like it was cracking under the weight of her suggestion. The next morning, I woke with a dull ache in my head and a heaviness in my chest. The couch offered little comfort, but it wasn't the physical discomfort that had me feeling so off. It was the lingering words Clara had spoken the night before. I couldn't wrap my head around how the woman I loved, who had been my rock for years, could suggest something that felt so fundamentally wrong to me. Clara acted as though nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, hummed a soft tune, and moved around the kitchen as if our conversation the night before had been a bad dream. But I couldn't ignore it. Every time I looked at her, the same question echoed in my mind. Why? Over breakfast, the tension was palpable. Clara tried to make small talk, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. My responses were clipped, my tone distant. Finally, she put down her mug and looked at me with those earnest, pleading eyes that once melted my heart. Darren, we need to talk about this. We can't just ignore it. I'm not ignoring it, I snapped, harsher than I intended. I'm trying to understand how you could even suggest something like that after everything we've been through, Clara. She winced but didn't back down. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I thought it could be something we explored together, something to strengthen our bond. Strengthen? I laughed bitterly. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't some harmless adventure. It's our marriage you're playing with. Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of regret, but it was fleeting. Darren, I love you. I wouldn't have brought this up if I didn't think it could help us. Help us? The word stung. As far as I was concerned, we didn't need help, or at least we hadn't until now. Clara, if you think this is what we need, then maybe you don't know me as well as I thought, I said, standing up and leaving the table before I said something I couldn't take back. The following days were a blur of avoidance. Clara and I coexisted in the same space, but rarely spoke. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra projects just to delay coming home. When I was home, I retreated into the spare bedroom, claiming it was easier than sharing a bed with the growing chasm between us. But Clara wasn't one to let things fester. One evening, as I walked in the door, she was waiting for me. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm of emotions. We can't keep doing this, she said firmly. We need to talk. Talk about what, Clara? I said wearily. You've made your feelings clear, and I've made mine clear. What else is there to say? She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. I don't want us to fall apart, Darren, but I also can't ignore the fact that something is missing. Missing? I repeated, incredulous. What's missing, Clara? Because from where I'm standing, the only thing missing is the woman I married. Her expression shifted, hurt, frustration, maybe even a hint of anger. That's not fair, she said quietly. I'm still the same person. I still love you. Then why does it feel like I don't even know you anymore? I shot back, the words sharper than I intended. She didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, the room was filled with a suffocating silence. Finally, she said, I didn't mean to make you feel this way. I just thought maybe we needed something to bring us back together. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. I wanted to believe her, to trust that her intentions were pure, but the doubt in my heart was too strong. Over the next week, the tension between us continued to grow. Clara seemed determined to revisit the idea, finding subtle ways to bring it up in conversation. Each time, I shut her down, my resolve hardening with every attempt. But the strain was taking its toll on both of us. It was on a Saturday morning, while I was sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone, that Clara approached me again. Darren, she began, her tone softer this time. I know you don't want to talk about this, but I can't let it go. It's important to me. I set down my mug and looked at her, exhaustion evident in my eyes. Why, Clara? Why is this so important to you? She hesitated, then said, Because I feel like we're stuck, like we've been going through the motions for years, and I don't want us to wake up one day and realize we've lost each other. Her words hit a nerve. I couldn't deny that our marriage had its challenges, every marriage does, but I didn't believe the solution was to invite chaos into our lives. Clara, if you feel that way, we need to work on us. Just us. Not whatever this is. She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. I don't want to lose you, Darren. I really don't. Then let this go, I pleaded. Let's focus on fixing what's broken without tearing everything apart. For a moment, I thought she might agree, but the conversation was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and though Clara refrained from directly mentioning her proposal again, the unspoken tension remained. It was like a shadow following us, never visible, but impossible to ignore. I tried to distract myself with work and hobbies, but every quiet moment brought me back to the same questions. Was I failing her in some way? Had I overlooked signs that she was unhappy? Or was this just some passing phase, something she'd eventually let go of? One evening, as I sat on the patio with a beer in hand, staring out at the dimming horizon, I heard the sound of the sliding glass door. Clara stepped outside, her expression hesitant but determined. She sat down across from me, tucking her legs beneath her on the chair. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice calm and measured. She'd already done my stomach. She'd at the thought for a while. I just sat there, staring at the evidence in front of me. Every instinct told me to confront Clara immediately, but I knew I needed to keep my emotions in check. If I approached her in anger, I'd lose the chance to get the truth. I carefully returned the letters and photos to the box and tucked it away where I had found it. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Clara noticed my distraction, asking several times if I was okay. I forced a smile and gave vague responses, not trusting myself to say more. Inside, I was a storm of anger, betrayal, and hurt, but I needed answers, and I knew I wouldn't get them if I let my emotions take over. That night, after Clara had gone to bed, I retrieved the shoebox and read through the letters again. They painted a picture I didn't want to see. Adrian wasn't just some fleeting crush or distant memory. He had been a part of Clara's life for months, maybe longer. The dates on the letters overlapped with times I thought she was working late or spending time with friends. My chest tightened as I realized how blind I had been. While I was pouring my energy into repairing our marriage, she had been entertaining someone else. The anger I had suppressed all day bubbled to the surface, and I clenched my fists to keep from slamming them against the table. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I had to confront Clara, no matter how painful it might be, but I wanted to hear it from her. I needed her to admit what she had done, to face the reality of what her actions had done to us. The next morning, I waited until Clara was in the middle of her coffee. Her guard was always down in those quiet moments, and I needed her to be unprepared for what I was about to say. "Clara," I began, my voice steady but firm, "I found something yesterday, something we need to talk about." She looked up, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "What is it?" I walked to the garage, retrieved the shoebox, and placed it on the table in front of her. Her expression shifted immediately. Confusion gave way to alarm, and then to something that looked dangerously close to guilt. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You tell me," I replied, folding my arms across my chest. "I found it in the garage. Care to explain?" She hesitated, her eyes darting between the box and my face. "Darren, it's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Don't tell me it's not what I think. I read the letters, Clara. I saw the photos. Who is Adrian?" She opened her mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, her gaze dropping to the table. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she whispered, He's someone I met a while ago." It wasn't supposed to mean anything. Not supposed to mean anything? I repeated, incredulous. "Clara, these letters aren't meaningless. They're detailed, emotional. This wasn't just some passing fling." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head. "I never meant for it to go this far. I was lonely, Darren. You were always busy, always distracted. I felt invisible." Her words stung, but they didn't excuse what she had done. "So your solution was to find someone else, to keep this lie going while I was trying to make things better?" "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I could just end it and move on, but then it got complicated." "Complicated?" I scoffed. "You think that's a good excuse, Clara? You betrayed me. You betrayed us." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Darren, please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." I shook my head, my heart breaking as I looked at her. "You didn't just make a mistake, Clara. You made a choice, over and over again. You chose to lie to me, to betray me. How do you expect me to come back from this?" Her tears fell freely now, but I felt no satisfaction in seeing her cry. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had shattered everything we had. And as much as I wanted to believe her apologies, I couldn't ignore the weight of what she had done. "I need time," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Clara. Not for this." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with her guilt and the mess she had created. The days that followed were a blur of silence and avoidance. Clara tried to approach me a few times, her face etched with remorse, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. Every time I looked at her, all I could see were those letters and the life she had been living behind my back. It was as if the foundation of our marriage had been pulled out from under me, leaving me standing on shifting sand. I spent most nights at the office or driving aimlessly through the city, trying to make sense of what had happened. How had we gone from the couple that laughed at inside jokes and shared quiet moments to this? The betrayal felt like a wound that refused to heal, raw and throbbing, no matter how much distance I tried to put between us. One evening, after a particularly long day, I found myself parked outside a small bar I used to frequent in my younger years. The dimly lit sign above the door read, "Jake's Tavern," and it brought back memories of simpler times, when life was less complicated and heartbreak was something that happened to other people. I walked inside. The familiar scent of stale beer and polished wood hit me like a wave. The bartender, an older man with a kind face, nodded in recognition. "Been a while, hasn't it?" "Too long," I replied, taking a seat at the bar. He slid a glass of whiskey in front of me without asking. "Looks like you need this." I nodded in thanks and took a sip, the burn of the alcohol providing a brief distraction from the ache in my chest. I sat there for hours, nursing my drink and listening to the hum of conversations around me. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm, even if it was fleeting. When I finally returned home that night, the house was quiet. Claire was already in bed, or at least pretending to be. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken weight of everything that had happened. I went straight to the spare room, closing the door behind me and collapsing onto the bed. Sleep didn't come easily, my mind replaying every moment of the past weeks like a cruel loop I couldn't escape. The next morning, Clara cornered me in the kitchen. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy from crying. "Darren," she began softly, "we can't keep living like this. I know I hurt you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. But I need to know, do we have a chance?" I stared at her, the woman I had once vowed to spend my life with, now a stranger in so many ways. "I don't know," I admitted. "Honestly, I want to believe we can, but every time I think about what you did, I don't know if I can move past it." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might break down again, but she straightened, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes, Darren. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't give up on us." Reluctantly, I agreed to try counseling. Part of me wanted to believe it could help, that there was still something worth salvaging between us. The first session was awkward, to say the least. We sat on opposite ends of a small couch in the therapist's office, neither of us knowing where to start. The therapist, a calm and patient woman named Elise, guided us through the process, encouraging us to speak openly and honestly. At first, it was hard to hear Clara talk about why she had done what she did. She spoke about feeling disconnected, about craving excitement and attention in ways she didn't know how to express. It was painful to listen to, but it also forced me to confront my own role in our marriage. I had been distant at times, more focused on work than on nurturing our relationship. That didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand how we had ended up here. As the weeks went on, we began to make small steps toward healing. Counseling forced us to communicate in ways we hadn't in years, to lay bare the fears and frustrations that had been simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wanted to walk away, when the weight of the betrayal felt too heavy to bear. But something kept pulling me back, a small, stubborn hope that maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. Clara worked hard to regain my trust, going out of her way to be transparent about everything. She deleted Adrienne's number, blocked him on every platform, and even let me read her messages if I wanted to. It felt invasive, but it was the only way I could begin to feel secure again. Months passed, and slowly the cracks in our marriage began to mend. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt and pain, but we were trying. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us a chance." I looked at her, seeing the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I'm not doing this just for you," I replied. "I'm doing it for us, because I believe we're worth it." For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw hope in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt it too.